parts of this starter application were created by Visual Studio itself. I didn't have to type all of this in. So let me show you how to create a new application using Visual C++ Express. When you open Visual C++ Express, most of the time it's going to look like this. This is called the Start page. Now, there may not be a Start page when you open it if somebody unchecked this box here that says Show Page on Startup. If that's the case, you can always get it back on the View menu, choose Start Page. In older versions of Visual Studio, a lot of people check this box, Show Page on Startup, because the Start page serves no purpose once you've started. And it just sort of uses up a tab and gets in the way. That's why I love this tick, Close Page After Project Load. This lets me have a startup page every time I launch Visual Studio, but it doesn't bother me because as soon as I open an existing project, it goes away. And speaking of opening existing projects, here under Recent Projects, it lists out my recent projects. So the Hello project that I used in a previous demo is listed here, and it's a single click to open that up and start working on it. But I want to show you how to make a new one, so I'm going to click New Project. Because this is Visual C++ Express, it's only offering me C++ applications. If you're using another version of Visual Studio, it may be offering you Visual Basic or C# or any other number of languages, and that's fine. Make sure you find the C++. And there are several different kinds of applications, and there are two different kinds with console in their name. CLR console application and Win32 console application. And it's important not to get them confused. The CLR console application has a rather unhelpful description, a project for creating a console application. You're like, woohoo, that must be what I want, right? No. What you want is a Win32 console application. The difference is that a CLR console application is that C++ CLI. It runs under the .NET framework. So yes, it's a console application, but it's not just C++. It has those extensions in it to make it C++ CLI. It makes managed code. That's not what we're doing. So we want the Win32 console application. Win32 project makes a Windows application. A Windows Forms application makes a managed Windows application. Definitely don't want those. Makefile project is appropriate if you're coming over from another compiler, probably from another platform, and you want to use something called a makefile to control the way your project builds. We're not going to go there. Empty project is what it sounds like. You have to add things to it. CLR empty project, same deal but slightly different settings. And then finally class library. I mentioned you can write libraries in C++ for reusable code that's used by many other different applications. It's a useful thing, but it's not what we're making today. So we want to use a Win32 console application. And you can give it whatever name you like, say First App, and put it wherever you like. By default, Visual Studio likes to put things in your documents under Visual Studio 2010 projects. And if that's where you're happy to have them, then that can be where they are. I have a different place for mine, doesn't really matter. I'm just going to click OK. And in some languages, you make a new project, you get a new project. But in C++, you get a wizard. It doesn't have very many steps. In fact, it really only has 2 steps, and the first one doesn't do anything, but you have a wizard. If, without seeing the settings, you're great because you just know what the settings are, you could click Finish right now. Let's say we're not going to. Let's click Next. Now you may have noticed a slight sort of change in the font situation on this side. It turns out this is an index into the steps of the wizard. So if I click Previous, you can see one's a link and one's not. And that's our 2 steps of our wizard. So I could also get through it by clicking this or by using the Next and Previous. Now the questions that it's asking here are questions it already knows the answers to. Do you want a Windows app, a console app, a DLL, or a library? Well, I already said I wanted a console app. Do you actually want nothing at all? You can tick Empty Project. And you're probably thinking, well, if I want an empty project, wouldn't I have chosen Empty Project? I know, I didn't write this wizard. This is just what it is. This precompiled header, I'm going to suggest that you leave ticked even though you don't really know what it means. It is something that makes your application compile faster. It doesn't make it run faster, but it can make it compile faster, and it's therefore a good habit. You won't be able to take full advantage of it for a while yet, but if you just get in the habit of leaving that ticked, it won't hurt you. And then over here we have some things that are grayed out. And the reason they're grayed out is that this dialog is shared by different versions of Visual Studio, and in some of the other versions you have options to add common header files for ATL and MFC. Express doesn't support ATL or MFC, so those options are grayed out. So it turns out you really have nothing to do on this step of the wizard except click Finish, but you needed to look at it before you could do that. So the wizard runs, and you can see that it generates some of the things that you saw in the sample app I showed you. The comment, saying the name of the file and defines the entry point for the application. The include of standardafx.h, and that's actually there because you ticked the precompile headers box. The tmain and the return 0. So you would put your own code in here to do whatever it is you wanted your application to do. I haven't really talked about Solution Explorer up until now, but this is a good time to explain a little bit. Solution Explorer is showing you all of the files in your project and in your solution. The sort of unit of work in Visual Studio is a solution, and a solution contains one or more projects, and a project is in a single language, contains one or more files, and you build a project at a time. If there are multiple projects in a solution, you can build them independently or build the whole solution at once, and one of the projects typically produces an executable that you can actually run. So when you right-click on the solution, one of your choices is to build the solution. When you right-click on the project, you have a build that would just build the project. Project only, build only first app, and so on. Here we have only one project in our solution, so there's not much of a distinction between the whole solution and this single project, but that's how it's organized in here. And then you have your files, and Solution Explorer categorizes your header files separately from your source files. It's just a convenience. They're not actually arranged this way on your hard drive. So if I come up here to this tab, and one thing a lot of people don't know is that if you pause, it'll tell you the path to the file. I can right-click the tab and choose Open Containing Folder. And these are the actual files on my machine that have been created as part of creating this project. Now you'll see that they're not split up into folders about headers and source and so on. The .h files and the .cpp files are all in here together. That's just the way that Solution Explorer shows them to you. And to open any other file in the editor, you just double-click it over here in Solution Explorer. This is readme.txt, which explains what all the bits and pieces of the project are. And this is that standardafx.h. Standardafx.h is your precompiled headers, basically things that you use a lot in many different places. You can put in here, and it will speed up the compilation process. This poor little application doesn't use anything, never mind using something a lot in a lot of different files, so we don't have anything extra in standardafx.h. Now that I have multiple files open in Visual Studio, you can see how they each have their own document tab across the top. You can switch between them just by clicking on the tabs, pretty straightforward, and you can close any one of them just by clicking its X. It doesn't have to be open for you to close it that way. I hope this helps you to see how Visual C++ Express works and how to work with it. The most important things you're going to do is typing code here in this editor and running your applications and looking at the output and learning from what you see in the output. A little bit of moving around from file to file and occasionally creating a new project, and you're ready to go in terms of using Visual C++ Express, which means you're ready to go in terms of learning some syntax for C++.